Well, this video was bound to happen on talking about one of the most infamous episodes from Xiaolin Chronicles. Chase lays an egg. I don't even think I need to describe of how much that this episode really is one of the worst episodes from the franchise. Granted, there are other bad episodes, even from the original by chance, but at the same time, this episode, when I first watched it, along with my rewatch for my review, I can instantly tell that they are literally trying everything, and yet at the same time, it barely does anything but waste our time. So, the biggest reason onto why Xiaolin is acting weird is because one of Jack Spicer's inventions, or mainly liquids in this case, has been inside of Xiaolin's food. And this really made Xiaolin completely acting differently when it comes to being pregnant. But considering that Xiaolin is laying an egg, it really makes this entire episode really difficult to enjoy. Not to mention that it really damages the character of Xiaolin. Not only that, this episode has taken inspiration from the Xiaolin Showdown Season 2 episode, The Apprentice, which for me personally, if I compare that episode to this, that episode would have been a lot better, but considering the main focus of this episode centers around Chase and his egg, I'm just gonna say this right now, it's really weird to see these two characters being together, because at the same time, when it comes to how they were developed in the Apprentice episodes, they had actual motivations. The motivations that they have in this are really weak. But let me tell you, the fact that Chase is laying an egg, it's also a Shingon rule. Trust me when I say this, that when this show has stooped this low to do something like that, then it really shows that all hope of this being a continuation from the original or being its own thing is completely gone. You see, when I first watched this episode for the first time, on it being one of the worst episodes, I was skeptical, and I was mostly confused at what it was trying to do. And even if I did get most of the information correctly, the egg bit, well, it's not really from Xiaolin, really confused me. So upon watching it for a second time, apparently it was actually true. Chase laid an egg, and that's officially a Shingon rule. That really makes no sense whatsoever. And the fact that this leads to the ending really raises more questions. Xiaolin saw that Jack Spicer's invention was in his pancakes, or basically making contact with his pancakes, and yet he still ends up eating them. So in all honesty, the fact that no one even tries to stop Xiaolin from eating the pancakes after this just showcases that none of the characters in this show are realistic or meaning something in order to make us feel invested. Like, as much as people may criticize that Omi gets more screen time in this compared to the other characters, it really feels like that they just only contribute on helping out, which isn't a problem, that's their main contributions, but at the same time, it just feels like that whenever I see the other characters do something, they're mainly there for comic relief, or mainly there just to remember who they were in the past, which isn't really a good sign, knowing full well that Raimundo, Kimiko, and Clay have basically less to do in the spin-off rather than what they did the most in the original. And while I understand that they're smart enough to not trust Jack, unlike Omi, it's still the same idea from The Apprentice. At this point, the dumbed down nature in this spin-off is an indication onto why that, compared to other spin-offs, there are actual spin-offs that take themselves slightly seriously, and whenever this show tries to take itself seriously, it's for the stupidest reasons. And don't even get me started on the scene where Paimon exposes himself in front of Kimiko, because as much as I know that Kimiko would have been a lot more disgusted than that, it didn't make me laugh whatsoever on how adorable Paimon is, because Paimon at this point, even if I didn't watch all the episodes, haven't been that interesting, and it just didn't invest me completely because of how everything is gift wrapped to him, rather than him owning it. Getting back to Xiaolin, let's be real. Just thinking about him in this episode is literally everything that really loses any credibility of this being its own thing, because it just barely doesn't know what it wants to be most of the time, to the point that if it can't be able to pick a target audience, then it really shows that this show isn't for everyone. Granted, in the original, it isn't for everyone, but at least it tried to find the audience that it tried to grow. And believe me, when we get to the scene where Xiaolin breaks down crying, then no, that's not something that Xiaolin would do whatsoever. It would have instantly derailed a character completely, to the point that whenever I see Xiaolin in this, and the fact that we reached to this scene, it really feels like that this is a completely different character. And trust me, when we got to the ending, well, it's revealed that Omi is part of Xiaolin's family, it just doesn't really work, especially since that there was another episode that focuses on Omi being an orphan, all the while that he really needs to find where he came from. And considering that I don't even think that this show did any indication of where Omi came from, since that in the beginning he didn't get any mail, I just don't even understand why we need to keep making this tension on Omi being depressed while waiting to see his parents. Because let me tell you, the Christmas episode is an indication that I can't be able to find any information or any hope or basically anything of what I want to see involving Omi and his family, if he ever has a family. Like, if you're going to build up the tension and the fact that the development involving Omi in this is getting way more, and yet at the same time it's not completely fleshed out due to the poor writing, then I would rather just compare an episode from the original that did something better than what anything of what this show did. And believe me, I'm getting... We're probably gonna be entering Lighthouse vs. Cross-Argantes territory once I get into a couple or few episodes. Believe me when I say this, there's at least 2 episodes that are similar to the original. And once we get into those in the future, you might understand onto why that the original is obviously way better than Xiaolin Chronicles. When it comes to the Xiaolin showdown that makes this episode worse, it's literally getting the egg while being levitated on clowns. Heads of clowns or clown rockets, and the showdown is called Clown World, which is mainly in space with nothing going on in the background. And I understand that the Xiaolin showdown is in CGI, but it doesn't really excuse of how lazy this is. This doesn't feel like an actual competition when literally the purposes of the clowns, aside from levitating up in the air, is if you get inside them, you get trapped. And for me personally, I can't be able to take that seriously because of how lazy this showdown is. So in all honesty, the fact that this showdown is weak, all the while that it's in CGI, it just goes to show that the CGI is the least of the showdown's problems. And the fact that the egg is a Shingaru in this showdown really makes the stakes even less important. And trust me, At this point, I can't be able to find any redeeming qualities in this episode when it barely does anything to take itself seriously most of the time. I don't even think that there will ever be another spin-off that really fails this poorly like Xiaolin Chronicles. And trust me, when it comes to the future plans of having this spin-off by comparing it to the original for future Cartoon Crisis 3 videos, believe me when I say this, I choose wisely, and whenever I think about those possibilities, it's mainly of how the execution from the original was thought out while the execution in this isn't. Bottom line, this is one of the worst episodes from not only this show, but the entire franchise. And it's basically the lowest point when it comes to the Xiaolin franchise, which is honestly a shame. And believe me, once I get into those future projects, you'll understand onto why that the episodes from this are really the total opposite, since that people barely talk about those episodes, but I don't really blame them. I'm giving this episode a 2.5 out of 10.